Welcome to the Balls Talk Sports NFL podcast. I'm Nelson Gratz. That's Victor Ratliff. And holy hell, Victor, what a wild card weekend it
Woo!
was.
Man, that was some of the best football we've seen in a long time. I mean, honestly, that is the second best overall weekend of at least playoff football I've ever seen. Of course, number one was the 21 or 22 divisional round. Four photo finishes across the league, if you remember it. Bengals, Titans, ends on a field goal. Niners, Packers, ends on a field goal. Sorry to do it to you. Um,
Ah,
And then you had the legendary Rams come back over the Tom Brady led Buccaneers and the 42-36 overtime
yeah.
changing overtime rule changing Chiefs Bills classic. Like incredible weekend of football, but this is a close second. I mean, we were talking about it before the show. 23 quarters, we guess, of competitive close football where either team can win. I think that's a record.
Even the quote unquote bad games, like nobody is going to watch Chargers Patriots and say, wow, that was really entertaining. It was tense, though. I mean, both those teams were in it for a long time, and ultimately the Patriots were just able to win that grudge match. Texans Steelers was competitive for quite a while. There were some games that weren't pretty, but they were close. And when you're in the playoffs, that's what you want to see. This is a big win for the pro seventh seed community.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean that was insane. Like I don't know if we'll see another wild card weekend like that again, especially the way it kicked off because the four best games were the four first games, you know? So we were just eating good for a couple of days. But we're on to the divisional round. The victors have been crowned and they were moving on. And it's time to talk about how well that they're going to do against a couple teams that had a bye that didn't play this week and other teams that won. So this is also going to be a very entertaining episode. And spoiler alert, I think the games might be just as good this week as they were last week. We got some heck of an entertaining matchups on the way. And I don't know, man. A lot of these games, it's flip a coin, take your pick.
Four rock solid games. Are we ready to get kinky?
Let's get kinky. Second week of the playoffs. I'm feeling it.
All right, so before the episode, you reminded me that last year we did post-mortems on the teams that lost on Wild Card Weekend, and we decided we wanted to do that again. Our first game, because I figured we'd just go chronological again, is the Buffalo Bills headed to Denver to take on the Broncos. Broncos are favorites at Mile High, but do we want to talk about the Jaguars first?
So that's a good question. Do we want to do like the divisional games first, then the postmortems after, or do we want to go like game by game, team by team?
Yeah, when you put it that way, I think we probably go with the divisional games first. You go with that?
Yeah, let's do that. All right, Broncos, Bills.
This one's up to you since your
All
team is
right.
playing.
Yeah, so Elson's team is no longer in the playoffs. I'm sorry, man. I mean, we'll get to that. We'll get to the postmortem because that was yeah, I'm not gonna rub it in anymore. That was ridiculous.
I
Um,
appreciate you. Appreciate you for that.
but Bills Broncos on the way. A rematch of last year's wild card round where the Bills trounced the Broncos, honestly, 31-7. But honestly, when you look back at that game, like I did, I watched it again. I've watched that game like 4 or 5 times by now. But mostly just to see how well Bo Nix played in the first half, because that gave me a lot of life over the summer. That was like, I can hold on to this throughout all of the haters talking about Bo. I can hold on to this. Um, and you look back at that game, it was really close up until the fourth quarter. Like a couple of things go the right way for the Broncos, and they're leading going into the fourth quarter. Missed field goal half, a drop to get them out of field goal range. Um, and then Josh Allen had one of the most ridiculous fourth down conversions ever that ended up being a touchdown on that play. Like there were just a lot of crazy shit that went against the Broncos in that game, but they still lost 31-7, and it was a resounding loss. The Bills were the better team for 4 quarters, and it was clear. And now the Broncos are the higher rated team. It was the 2 versus 7. Now it's the 1 versus 6. And I think they're favored by, correct me if I'm wrong, 1.5 points by Vegas. The Broncos are.
They
Um,
are. Yep.
yeah, so they're 1.5 point favorites. And I don't know if that much has changed in the rosters. Now, Bills are missing a couple of key receivers. In the last 3 weeks, in the last week, they've had 3 receivers go on IR. Gabe Davis, Tyrell Shavers, and Josh Palmer all going to be out for the rest of the season. You're missing those guys, which means that it is up to, I kid you not, Keon Coleman, Brandon Cooks, and Khalil Shakir to win them this game from the receiver position. I'm going to tell you right now, if Cookies Keon Coleman has a legacy game against the Broncos this week, I will come on this podcast and kill myself next week. That cannot happen. I don't care if we lose this game. I cannot see Keon Coleman do that, because that would just be a game that would never be forgotten. That would be worse than the Mile High Miracle, if we're being honest. That would be worse. Please don't put Surtain on him the entire game. I don't care if we lose. That has to be priority number one. But getting into this game right now, Bills are a interesting team, because when you look at their talent overall, that roster, especially with the injuries, doesn't stack up very well to the rest of the league. Like, I feel like it's a relatively league average roster. They don't do a lot of stuff really, really well. I mean, they've got they've got a good offensive line. They've got a great running back, a solid secondary, and a pair of solid edge rushers. Like, you have the building blocks. It's not a bad roster by any means. It's just not like a Super Bowl caliber roster like this team has been built to be. They're expected to be competing. I think they're the AFC favorite for the Super Bowl right now, if I'm not mistaken, as well. So the roster just doesn't really connect with the expectations, but you do have Josh Allen on that team, and that's why you have that disconnect. I really think this game can go a lot of ways. It's been very clear that the Broncos haven't been able to run the ball very well for the last half of the season, especially since J.K. Dobbins went down. And the Bills really played very well in pass coverage last week, and they got gashed in the run, just like they'd been done all year. If the Broncos can't gash them in the run game, if they have to pass throughout the entire day, I don't think they're going to win this game. They need to be able to get something going on the ground early, get RJ Harvey rolling. And Sean Payton's a very creative run caller, especially with screens. You can use that as an extension of the run game, and that will still attack Buffalo's weaknesses. But they have not been able to run the ball well, and that's a big concern early. And on the Bills' offense side of the ball, they have made their money off of getting to the red zone and converting. They're the number 2 red zone offense in the league, and it feels like they stall out a decent amount of their drives. Like, they don't get a lot of they don't get as many red zone drives as you would expect from a team built as a contender, but when they do, they convert them. However, the Broncos, other side of the ball, the number 1 red zone defense, I think on that side of the ball, it's going to come down to who can make their money in the red zone, who can play really well, right? If the Bills can punch it in consistently, they get 3 red zone drives, they convert on all of them. I think that's probably enough to win them this game. I think this is going to be a low scoring game. I think the Broncos are going to be able to do whatever they want defensively. They're going to play man coverage on these receivers. They're going to be able to run around to do that and sell out to defend the run. That means the Bills are going to have a tough time up front. It's going to come down to, can Josh Allen escape the pocket? Can those tackles, Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown, do what they did last time? Beat Nick Bonito and John Cooper and kind of not make them massive impacts. If the Bills can do that, if they can just do enough, they can win this game. It feels like this is a first to 20 wins game. And with how tough of a time Denver's had running, even though Bo Nix has been really good the past few weeks, even though he stepped up in the big moments against a heavy disguise coverage defense like the Bills, he's going to have to think twice a lot. He's going to hesitate. He's going to make one too many mistakes. I think the Bills are going to be able to drive down the field a couple times. I think Josh Allen is going to help them. I think they're going to win the red zone battle against the Broncos defense that is very good. I don't think they're quite elite. I'm going to take the Bills to win this game 20-17, really close defensive battle.
So, Victor, you almost sold me on the Broncos because, spoiler alert, I also do have the Bills. I have the Bills 24-23 in what is technically an upset, but what is practically anybody's game. You almost swung me because I think you did a great job selling your team to me there. However, when you mentioned that the Broncos aren't very consistent running the football and that so much of what they do is getting RJ Harvey the ball in space and creating explosives behind the line of scrimmage, I had to pull up NFL Pro because I couldn't remember many times that the Bills have gotten beat by screen passes and that sort of stuff. So I wanted to check the stats and see if my mental heuristic was accurate. Buffalo is dead last at minus 0.36 EPA per play on backfield targets. They have just eliminated the screen game essentially, and all running back passing.
Okay, so I'd like to, is backfield targets, does that constitute like just running backs targeted in before the line of scrimmage, or is that like receivers? Because most of the Broncos screen game is two receivers on the outside, bubble screens, RPOs, tunnel screens, a lot of that. They honestly don't use Harvey much in the screen game.
I think that backfield targets is anybody who starts in the backfield, so that would just be running backs.
Yeah. I mean, but that's still something to watch because they do use him from the screen game a little bit. It's not like a never thing. They like to get him the ball in space, easy touches.
Well, and that's something I was thinking about going into the game because everybody knows at this point that you beat the Bills by running the ball down their throat, although they might be returning Ed Oliver in this one, which could
Yeah.
potentially be a big factor,
Big.
a little bit more stout against the run and an impact pass rusher as well. And Harvey's come through with some explosives and big spots for the Broncos, and that's helped their offense move the ball a little more consistently. And I don't know how much of that you're going to be getting in this one. And then, like you mentioned, the Bills have nothing as far as outside receivers right now. I mean, when the best guy in that room is either Brandon Cooks at what, 34 years old,
At least.
or Keon Coleman, who I think had one catch last week against Jacksonville. It was a huge catch.
It was
That's a
big.
bad place to be. But one of the benefits of the Joe Brady offense is the way that they're able to weaponize stacks and pre-snap motion to get guys like Khalil Shakir easy looks. He had 12 targets, led the team, 12 receptions, led the team by a mile, 82 yards, led the team by a mile against the Jaguars. So they were able to lean into him. And look, I think Keon Coleman might not make a catch in this game, but if he is lined up across from Riley Moss, he's going to have about three pass interference calls for about 85 yards, and
Yeah.
that can recreate some of that vertical offense that the Bills are lacking. I like that you bring up the red zone because that is going to be absolutely key. The Bills are an incredibly unexplosive offense. They throw behind the sticks an incredibly frustrating amount. This is why I don't really like Joe Brady as an offensive mind, even though I can acknowledge some of the good things that he does. They don't feel like they're out to get you. It feels like it's just let James Cook create some explosives and get you more yards than he should get based on the defensive front and let Josh Allen do his thing. But when you have that kind of talent, it works out okay. And I do think that the Bills have the advantage in the red zone over a really stellar red zone Broncos defense because of what a unique asset Josh Allen is. I mean, we saw it against the Jaguars last week. QB sneak, and I think it was fourth and short. The
Yeah.
Jags just should have pushed him into the end zone for a touchdown
Oh
on that
man.
play, and it should have been a 9-yard touchdown on a QB sneak. That is what Josh Allen brings. And so I do think the Bills are going to be able to put up enough points in that phase. It's probably not going to be a pretty game. I think it's going to be a game with a limited number of possessions, and it's going to come down to who can create the most explosive plays. And that's why I have Bills 24-23. I trust Josh Allen a little more, especially after we saw him play one of his best games of the year against a great defense in Jacksonville last week.
Yeah, and I think you said it perfectly. Like neither of I think both of these teams are bottom 10 in drives per game. I mean, that's just based off of what I've watched this season. Neither of these teams gets a lot of drives because they love for all the Broncos' faults in the run game, they still do love to run the ball. Like Sean Payton loves to run the ball and he loves to get it on screens, and those take up a lot of time, especially because they are rather efficient with screens. I know Broncos fans would tell you otherwise. The screen game does actually work for them. That takes up a lot of time. And as the Bills go, they love to just run the ball down your throat. They love to take that clock down and really hammer home a specific concept until we see the look we want, and then we can go with a counter to that, get James Cook in space against the safety, and it's barbecue chicken from there, you know. So this is going to be a game where a couple key plays might decide it, you know. Again, like we were talking about last week, both these teams are good teams. They're going to take this down to the wire, especially the Broncos. I mean, have they played in a non-one possession game since the Cowboys? I don't think so. You best believe that this game is going to come down to at least a 2-minute warning with both of these teams on each side of the ball. And at that point, again, I'm going to pick the Bills again for the same reason I did last week. I just trust Josh Allen a little bit more. Also, the Bills, they do run quite a bit of gap. I'd say about half of their runs are gap schemes. And the Broncos are great at stopping the zone, but they just aren't big enough to really consistently stop gap runs, getting those big guys in motion on the way towards those edges. Nick Bonito, John Cooper, they're not that big, so those kickout blocks just take them out, and then the lead blocker's able to just run through and create a massive gaping hole for James Cook to run through. We saw it with Jonathan Taylor earlier in the year. The Colts just killed the Broncos on the ground, using power, using counter. I think the Bills use a lot of that in tomorrow's game.
Well, and I don't even really think that it has to be a ton of your pin and pull and off tackle stuff. Like,
No.
don't get me wrong, they'll run that and they'll get theirs on that, but just come out and single back and run inside zone up the middle. The Bills have been able to do that, which is why they're able to sustain so many drives. And the Broncos have only been okay in taking that away. I do think of Denver as a much better pass defense than run defense.
I agree, but against zone, I do have concerns with the Bills, at least running zone against them, because the Bills, they have heavier linemen, and while they are athletic, they are not. I think if they run a lot of zone, if they try to attack the Broncos with a lot of inside zone or outside zone or mid zone or whatever you want to call, I think Zach Allen and I think John Franklin Myers, they are going to be able to shoot gaps and make big time plays and get the Bills behind the sticks. And the Bills cannot be behind the sticks. This is a team that, especially without their top receivers, against a fantastic man coverage defense, if they get behind the sticks, they're going to struggle a lot. I think they're going to try to keep stealth in front of them. That's why I'm more inclined to say they skew more towards gap.
That really is what it comes down to, though, is can they get into James Cook consistently and just stay ahead of the chains? Because if they can, and it's the Broncos playing behind from the entire game, I mean, we saw the havoc that Sean McDermott defense can create against Jacksonville, which has been a really hot offense down the stretch. I don't think that they have to totally shut down Bo Nix and the Broncos offense, but you get a couple mistakes and you pair that with just playing with the lead for the majority of the game, that really could be all it takes. One more thing I did want to ask you. So, Bo Nix has played 2 seasons in the NFL, and he hasn't looked great at the very beginning of either season. Is there any reason to be concerned about Bo Nix coming off of a bye week here?
No, actually, I don't think there is, because his best games this season came off of the bye week. He had a 4-week stretch of elite games. And I honestly think early, like the mid-season was not great for him. I think part of that may have been fatigue. They played, I think, 6 games in the span of like 38 days or something. And then they got the bye week. And then he comes out and just pitches 4 elite games in a row. I'm not elite, but I mean, a couple of them were elite, including that Packers game. Like Nix plays really, I think part of it was just he was a little bit tired. And I'm not really worried about him coming off the bye. I am worried about the Broncos to start next season because, Bo, I need you to turn it on earlier. But I am slightly worried about them also to start this game because the Broncos have a great habit, similar to the Bears, of not playing 4 quarters. So they'll play the 4th quarter, but they're not going to play all 4 quarters. We're going to have to see. I think if the Broncos want to win this game, somebody in the receiver room has to step up. Somebody has to make the plays. Nobody did last time. And I think on the defense, Tal Hufanga has to be just an eraser of Dalton Kincaid if you put him on the tight end, and he has to come downfield and make negative plays in the run game. That's how the Broncos win. If the Bills want to win, keep ahead of the sticks. Get Josh Allen using his legs on the ground because the Broncos struggle to tackle big guys, and Josh Allen's a big, fast guy. That's the best way for them to win. And then defensively, use a lot of disguise coverage. Make sure Bo Nix doesn't know what he's looking at to start, and keep him guessing throughout the entire game.
Are you guys getting Dre Greenlaw back this week?
Yeah, he's coming back. So that'll be big.
We've got the San Francisco 49ers, who I think we both picked against last week, right? We both picked Philadelphia.
We did, yeah.
49ers do it again. Just keep winning. They stay alive. And they go to take on their divisional rival, the Seattle Seahawks, coming off a bye week. Seattle 7-point favorites. Look,
Jeez.
I kind of get it because on paper, you just look at the rosters. The Seahawks are a dramatically better team, and they are well rested, and they are playing at home. But have we learned nothing that the 49ers just punch above their weight class? I am not comfortable calling the Seahawks 7-point favorites. That being said, I am going to pick Seattle. I am going to pick them relatively comfortably, 24-19. I mean, I think this is about a 60-40 type of game, and a Kyle Shanahan-led 49er squad is always going to have a chance. But last week, San Francisco lost George Kittle, and that is big. because he has continually been an easy button in this offense. Kittle is one of my favorite players in the NFL because he just doesn't really have any weaknesses in his game. He's a good route runner, he's a good athlete, he's great after the catch. He goes up and makes tough catches for you, both when you need him to just sit down in a zone and the defensive back gets a hand in there and he's going to hold on to the ball and move the chains, or you actually throw him up a jump ball in the seam or even split him out wide and have him run down the sideline and he can consistently make that catch. Not just that, but what he does as a blocker. I swear I'm not just going to talk about George Kittle this entire time. This year, when I started watching more tape and just looking at the little things that players do, I noticed that what makes George Kittle an impactful blocker isn't so much that he's just continuously driving guys out of position, playing in line like you see from your throwback 260, 265 pound tight ends. It's that he plays with his hair on fire as a blocker and with a ton of attention to detail. And he is incredibly sound just getting in guys' way and holding down his angles. And that is exactly what this 49ers offense needs to click. And I don't have the stat on hand. I wish that I did. But with Kittle on the field, they average about a yard extra per attempt. And this is already a Niners run game that isn't very efficient. You take Kittle out of the equation, your numbers are just weaker. You're not going to be able to run the ball as consistently. And obviously, you lose a really good pass catcher as well. Last week, Kyle Shanahan was able to get what he wanted. I love the way that he was able to pick on Adoree Jackson because they went at Quinyon Mitchell a couple times early. They were able to get Quinyon Mitchell a couple times early, and then Quinyon got his late. Cooper DeJean played a great game, made some stops, had some pass deflections, but they went at the weakest link consistently. And even though they don't have stellar wide receivers right now, that's why they were able to move the ball and put some points up on the board. They have not been able to replicate that against Seattle. 49ers have taken on the Seahawks twice this year, being that they're in the same division. Week one, they were able to win 17-13. Not an explosive offensive performance. Seattle offense was still settling in that one. And the 49ers also had some defensive talent left at that point because their entire defense wasn't injured yet. Week 18, they were completely shut down. Seattle wins 13-3. That doesn't really tell the story of the game. The 49ers got one clean stop on 7 real competitive drives. I mean, there was one kneel out drive. There was one drive with like 30 seconds to halftime. Seattle had a 4th down turnover in deep in the red zone in the low red, and they missed 2 extremely makeable field goals in that game. It should have been a 2 or 3 score win for Seattle. I'm not going to rule out the 49ers. There is a window of opportunity here. I mean, you never quite know what you're going to get from Sam Darnold in the playoffs. He's got to prove that, but this is just going to be an uphill fight for San Francisco the whole way.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I'm actually going to pick Seattle to win and cover. I'm going to pick them 20-10. It just kind of seems like this is the end for San Francisco, especially because you do have hope on the horizon. Because if you win this week, people are saying that Fred Warner's going to be back next week. They're saying he's going to be there for the NFC Championship. And I don't know, this team with Fred Warner, they can win a Super Bowl. Like it'd be tough, but they can do it. Without, I think they're going to fall to the Seahawks. I think you did a fantastic job of talking about this game. So I'm only going to contribute a couple more things, but I feel like the ways in which Purdy was able to win last week was he had a little bit more time. Philly didn't do a great job of getting pressure on him. They did a fine job, but it wasn't like suffocating. I think Seattle will be suffocating. They really have done a good job of getting at Purdy, especially in 3rd downs, 3rd and longs. They're making him nervous because the strongest links of that San Francisco pass protection are the tackles, Trent Williams, Colton McKivitz, and honestly, most of Seattle's pressure doesn't really come off of the edge, like straight up, because most of it comes from stunts and blitzes and interior pressure because you got 2 of the best interior guys in the league, Byron Murphy and Leonard Williams. Like, you were getting pressure off of the edge, but it's not just, okay, I have Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter and I'm just going to throw them at you. We're getting Byron Murphy out on the edge and Trent Williams or Colton McKivitz has to recognize that. It's not as much of a one-on-one typical as you think of it. Mike McDonald has everybody doing everything. blitzes are going to be really, really big in this game. If the Niners want to win, they're going to need to catch it. And they did a really, really bad job last week at catching those interior stunts, at catching blitzes and keeping Purdy clean. Whenever the Eagles brought a blitz, Purdy did a really good job of getting the ball out quick. But if that option wasn't available, the line didn't pick it up. So I don't think that they're going to be able to get open as often because they've been bringing out like third stringer receivers for the last 6 weeks, and against the secondary like Seattle's, Devin Witherspoon, Kobe Bryant, Julian Love, Nicky Manwari, Josh Jobe. I mean, so many great names on that secondary. It's just going to be really, really difficult to win against those guys. Seattle's going to make it difficult. They're going to play the run well. They're one of the best run defending teams in the league. They're one of the best defenses in the league. And then offensively, they're just going to have to do enough. I have my doubts about Sam Darnold. I don't know if he has the best game. I don't think it's enough to have them lose in this one. It is possible for the Niners to win because Saleh did a fantastic job of scheming up pressure, especially on third down and long. The Niners, honestly, they almost never ran zero in the or cover one in the regular season because they just don't have the corners to cover for that long. They did it almost exclusively on third down. Like they brought so many blitzes on third down, heat up Jalen Hurts, make him make a play, because early they were just dropping 7 into coverage, rushing 4, and they were just kind of picking on him on the outside. Those corners had to cover for too long because a 4-man rush wasn't getting it done. Saleh said, to hell with it. If we're going to get beat, I want to make Jalen Hurts nervous. I want to make him beat us. If Saleh does that again, if this Niners defense heats up Darnold again, they make him beat you. In the playoffs, Darnold has never proven that he can beat you. So this could become a really, really ugly game if they can get consistent pressure on Darnold. And I think that's the path to victory for San Francisco.
The unit that I'm really looking at this game are the San Francisco defensive backs, because that was a tremendous weakness for them early in the season. They were miserable whenever they were left on an island early on. And since then, I think Diamador Lenore is playing better, but especially Upton Stout, their, I think, fifth round pick that they shoehorned into a starting slot corner job early on. The returns were not pretty early on. They were never going to be pretty early on, but he's been making some plays since then. The reason that we both, I don't think he had a pick. I think he jumped a fourth down out route from Devontae Smith. He jumped it. He could have had the pick. He just bats it out of bounds. We're totally fine with that. Forces a turnover on downs. I think one of the big reasons that we mutually picked the Eagles last week is because for all of Philadelphia's offensive faults, which, you know, the faults are the entire offense, the offense is just faults, they will throw up a ton of one-on-one ISO balls. And that's not going to win very consistently in today's NFL. You need to be scheming guys open and creating looks that are efficient as possible. But if you're going to run that strategy on somebody, it might as well be the 49ers this year. And look, the defensive backs stepped up. They gave their team a chance. It was enough for San Fran to move on. And so that is going to be the key here. They're going to be able to, or they're going to need to hold up if they are calling more cover 1 and cover 0. That's a tough ask. And when the defensive line isn't able to get pressure, because they're not going to be able to get pressure, they haven't gotten pressure all year, they are going to have to hold up when Sam Darnold has a clean pocket. And Seattle is number 1 in the NFL in yards per play when passing from a clean pocket at 9.2. It's going to be a tough ask, but if they can do that, I think that is the 49ers' path, is that the DB's got to punch above their weight class.
Yeah, I agree. And I think also partly why I'm very confident in Seattle winning is it's just tough to see any scenario where they hold JSN under 100 yards. Like, he's just going to have a day. He's going to explode. I mean, this is a guy that it's just, you can't play man coverage on him. So the strategy that they really use to make Jalen Hurts nervous, it's not going to work as well because honestly, none of the Eagles receivers did a great job of getting open against man coverage last week. And when they did, Hurts missed him. So Darnold might miss him, but JSN is going to be so wide ass open on a couple of these plays, you can't miss him. So also, the Niners' run defense isn't great. The Seahawks' run offense isn't great. So I honestly think that the Hawks are going to have a decent time running the ball because of how Niners' run defense has been. I did like they had a couple of guys step up last game though. Jordan Elliott and Garrett Wallow played incredibly well. They found the ball a lot and they really just detonated gaps, made it hard for Barkley to find yards. So if they can have repeat performances, maybe make K9 nervous, then that's something to watch. But it just feels like an uphill game for the Niners to win, and I don't think they're going to be able to pull it off.
I think San Fran got Eric Kendricks off the street when they were down to
Yeah.
like their third and fourth linebackers. And look, I just don't understand how he was available. I mean, has he regressed from when he was, close to one of the elite guys at the position playing in Minnesota? Yes, he's regressed, but I thought he was good for Dallas last year. I did not think the Cowboys should have let him go, considering how they were scraping the bottom of the barrel at linebacker. I don't hate Eric Kendricks out there for the 49ers, but then again, do they really have the horses to compete with this Seattle run game that, yeah, they're inefficient, but they're also going to put 12 and 13 personnel on the field and just run at you a lot?
Yep.
I don't think that's a great matchup for the Niners.
Yeah. But it is a fun matchup either way because you probably got at least my two favorites for coach of the year right now, McDonald and Shanahan on each side of the ball. So, and a couple of great coordinators, Kubiak and Saleh, are both looking at a head coach job. So this is a coaching masterpiece of a game. I think if somebody outcoaches the other team, they got a good chance at winning.
Elite play calling head coach, borderline the most valuable asset in the NFL. So always
Yep.
going to give you a shot. Okay, next in line, we've got the Houston Texans, who I don't remember where I got this sweatshirt. It's probably at a thrift store. It's a ridiculously heavy sweatshirt, and it's a miracle that I'm not overheating right now. But I just went through my closet and said, okay, which one of these teams that I have jerseys and sweatshirts of is still alive? So that's why I'm rocking the Houston Texans merch. Also, just a really hard team to dislike. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm pulling for the Texans this week, but at the same time, Patriots, who are moving to 15-3 now after their win against the Chargers last week. They're not an easy team to dislike either. New England favored by 3. And why I think this is my most clear favorite is because the Texans are down Nico Collins.
Yeah.
And I don't know how they move the ball without Nico Collins. I think we might be looking at a 10 to 13 point outing for Houston, because what did they drop last week? Like 27 or 30, right?
Yeah.
Those points were not real.
That's
Those
true.
points were off of Steelers' mistakes, and CJ Stroud struggled for the vast majority of the game. I mean, if you want to praise any aspect of this Texans offense, they've gotten the run game going a little bit behind Woody Marks, who, I mean, we're both Marxists, we're
The
both fans.
Marxism.
But are you really gonna pick the Texans in this game because Woody Marks is having a solid rookie season? I don't think so. I've kind of been a Patriots hater this year. I mean, not in terms of actually disliking the team and the players and the coaches, but picking against them in spots where last week I picked the Chargers in the upset, and you picked the Patriots as favorites, and you were right. So it kind of surprises me that I'm picking the Patriots here because they were not good last week. I'm actually pretty happy with that take. And I think the reason that the Patriots won that game wasn't because they were definitively the better team. I thought that Drake May kind of struggled against, a real defensive line that got steady pressure on him. He's been a guy who's taken a lot of sacks all season, and he took 5 of them last week against the Chargers. It was just that the Chargers offense played worse and gave him opportunity after opportunity, and it was enough for the Patriots to win. But I think we're going to get a similar game script, and I don't want to fall into the trap of picking against a team that I think is due for some regression, because looking at the matchup, I just think the Patriots are that much better. I think they are going to do enough offensively against a really excellent Texans defense to come out of here with the win at home.
Yeah. I think this is probably the game that we see most differently because you said that this was your easiest matchup to pick. Well, this is one you're most confident about. This is the one I'm least confident about. This is a true 50-50 for me because, yeah, the Texans scored 30 points and a lot of them were not real points. They only needed to score 7. All right. They didn't need all of those points. They only needed 7 points. And New England's offense is absolutely better than Pittsburgh's offense. But against the Texans defense, I'm not really sure it matters. This unit of Houston, I mean, man, this is the best defense I've seen since, oh God, like I think this is the best unit I've seen since No Fly Zone. I can't think of a defense over the last 10 years that has been this good. And I think there's a common misconception around this team that, okay, you got these front four who are just psychos and they heat up the quarterback, and then they're kind of covering for like a decent secondary, but not elite. The secondary is honest to God better than the front four. I mean, you watched that game against Pittsburgh last week. Nobody is open down the field. DK Metcalf got open a few times, and that was it. Derek Stingley walling off his side of the field. Kamari Lassiter did an admirable job. Kalen Bullock patrolling the middle of the field. Like, if you throw a ball that is just a little bit off and it's a little bit late, Kalen Bullock is going to make the play. He's incredibly rangy. Jalen Petrie, man, what a game. I mean, he was just blanketing receivers from the nickel, and he had one of the best run defense games you'll ever see from a nickel cornerback or a box safety, or because he plays both, obviously, that big nickel type of player, the star position. One of the best run defense games you'll see. This is just an awesome defense. And I think that the Patriots offense is going to struggle just as much as the Texans offense will. I was not encouraged with what I saw from Drake May last game. It wasn't like awful, but he had a few times where I think he turned the ball over. Was it just the interception, or did he also fumble? Because I know he fumbled a couple of times. I don't know if he lost any of them.
I thought that he had two, but I could be wrong about that. I thought he had the pick, and I did think he lost a fumble.
So he turns the ball over twice, and it probably should have been more. He was really careless with the ball in the pocket and not just throwing turnover-worthy plays, but he was letting the ball rip when he probably should have honestly just taken the sack or tucked the ball and ran, because there were a couple of times where Chargers defenders almost got a hand on it. There was a couple of times where Chargers defenders did. I mean, there was that really bad play where he kind of gets hit in the arm and then he goes right back again to throw it and then he fumbles. That was an awful play. You can't do that against Houston because they're going to hit you quicker, right? I think they might turn a couple of those close turnovers into actual turnovers. On the other side of the ball, I'm not confident that either of these teams scores a lot of points. Definitely not Houston. I do think losing Nico isn't as big of a hit as like losing another number one wide receiver, because this offense really thrives on kind of that next man up energy. You've got a decent amount of receivers available. Christian Kirk had a fantastic game last week.
He did, yeah.
Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel have both stepped up in big time positions whenever Nico's been out earlier in the year. I think you can trust them at this point to come in and have an adequate game. Dalton Schultz is a really, really good receiving tight end. Well, not really, really good, but he can be. He has great moments. I think they will be able to throw the football because, honestly, watching that game back, Chargers-Patriots, I really felt like there were a lot more chances for Justin Herbert to gash them. There were a lot of players uncovered right for Herbert to see. There were. Man, I'm a Herbert defender, but man, that was a bad game. Like, it wasn't one of those where, the offensive line betrayed him. They did. And part of it was that, okay, I'm so scared of getting hit. I don't know if I have the time to rip that ball. I understand that. But Drake May plays with no fear. He's going to rip that ball. Or CJ Stroud, honestly, he might not rip that ball, but he will get out of the pocket. And when he's out of the pocket, there's nobody who loves to throw a tight window ball more than CJ Stroud. Like, when he gets out of the pocket, like he gets a little bit careless with it, but he's not going to just tuck the ball and take the sack, not always. I like CJ Stroud for that. And if they have a repeat performance of that secondary, kind of giving up a lot of those plays where they didn't get taken advantage of because Herbert didn't see him, the line didn't give him enough time, then I think we're concerned. Because honestly, but I don't think that will happen. I think the Texans will capitalize more on that because the Texans' offensive line is honestly better than the Chargers are. Like, that is probably a better unit right now. I think Stroud will have a little bit of time. I think he's going to be able to create better in open space than Herbert was last week. They're going to be able to take advantage of that. They'll be able to run the ball decently well, do just enough to get some points. The Patriots do just enough to get some points. Honestly, I think this game might go to overtime. Not a lot of points are going to be scored. They're just going to be field goals across the board. Neither of these offenses are going to step up. You got two solid defenses. I am going to lean with the Texans, though. I'm going to pick the upset. I'm going to take the Texans 16-13 because that defensive unit is going to make the big plays. If we hadn't seen Drake May kind of not really crumble, but show flaws, like there are cracks in the armor. If we hadn't seen that last week against the Chargers, if they had gotten the bye, I'd be more I'd be less concerned because I picked the AF by the way, I picked the AFC perfectly in the wild card round, you know. So I had this matchup, Patriots Texans, when we did our full Super Bowl predictions, and I picked the Patriots because I had confidence. May was going to be confident. He was going to rip those balls into tight seams, make the plays that the Texans were allowing because they're not disguising coverages as much. I don't have as much confidence he's going to be able to make those plays. I think the Texans do a better job of shutting down May than the Patriots do of shutting down CJ Stroud. I think the rumors of Stroud's demise have been greatly exaggerated. I think the Texans show that they're a damn good football team. I think Stroud impresses some people in a couple of key moments, a couple of big time plays. Texans go to the AFC Championship and they buck the trend of losing the divisional round every year.
You know what? You've definitely talked me down a little bit. I really like the point about how there were opportunities for the Chargers, and I mean, we'll finish that conversation when we do the Chargers post-mortem, but this is by no means a bulletproof New England defense. I mean, the Texans could just kind of luck their way into a couple explosive plays. You finish those drives with field goals or even score a touchdown, and yeah, you know what? You could win this game scoring 16 points. However, I'm really glad for the Patriots' sake that this team that has been red hot down the stretch, that really their biggest challenge has just been winning by bigger margins against bad football teams. I'm glad that they had a little bit of a wake up call against
That's
a
good.
genuinely good Chargers team and a genuinely great Jesse Minter Chargers defense that is going to get pressure on you and is going to get unpredictable pressure on you that can make a play extending QB like Drake May freeze up a little bit, that can deny him access to the sidelines and force him to try and hang in the pocket or scramble up the middle where he hasn't been quite as comfortable this season, and a Jesse Minter defense that keeps a lid on you super consistently and forces you to take the underneath stuff, which hasn't really been Drake May's game. It's really clear that Drake May is a fantastic learner. I mean, I remember last year when we were doing predictions, the majority of weeks, we got to predict Drake May's first start when they benched, who was it? Was it Jacoby Brissett?
Yeah,
And they put him in, I think, against the Texans, and it was like,
it was.
what the hell are you thinking? He is going to get decapitated. And you know what? He went out there and he played a solid game because he is mentally tough and he learns quickly. So I think that that was a really good experience for the Patriots. And look, we know how good the Texans defense is. They have playmakers at just every level of the field, lots of unique skill sets. That's why I think the Texans are such a fun team to root for. It's like you've got Derek Stingley, who's your elite athlete, elite ball skills guy. And then opposite him, you've got Kamari Lassiter, who is
Yeah,
not fast, but is
not elite
feisty as all
athlete.
hell, is somehow the best perimeter run defending cornerback in the NFL. And then you've got Aziz Al-Shaair, who
I didn't mention him.
people love to hate on him. I don't know. I think Aziz Al-Shaair is the kind of villain that the NFL needs more of at linebackers. Just one of the top hitters at the position. You've got Kalen Bullock, the rangy guy, the risk taker. And it's become pretty well documented that this Texans defense, they're so talented that they don't really disguise stuff. They just run a whole bunch of man coverage at you. There's a stat that I want to look up on NFL Pro. I don't think it should take long because teams that run a bunch of man coverage tend to be pretty vulnerable to the scramble. And we
Yeah,
know
they do.
how effectively Drake May can punish you with his legs. So if I go to Pro Preview, I really wish that scrambling allowed was a more accessible stat. The only way I've found to access it is looking in the NFL Pro Preview. Texans are the dead last defense against QB scrambles,
Yeah, they've
and it makes
struggled.
sense.
They've struggled against covering scrambles this year. It's been insane.
And you're going to give up yardage on the ground to Drake May, who's an underrated athlete who
Hmm.
can take chunks in that phase, and you're going to give up explosives down the field. And if there's one way to beat this Texans defense, you got to break the pocket because they are going to disrupt your pocket. They're going to muddy things up for you, and they are going to cover guys early in the down better than just about anybody. You got to escape, you got to buy time, you got to find guys down the field for chunks. It's got to be Stephon Diggs. It's got to be Kayshon Boutte getting some back shoulder work in. This is not a team of elite separators. Drake May is going to have to step up, buy time, and it's going to be a game of margins. It's going to be a game of contested catches. But I do trust the Patriots offense a little bit more. And I think I'm a little bit lower on CJ Stroud at this point as well. I thought he was pretty rough against the Steelers
That's true.
early in the game, and the Steelers should have been able to capitalize. It was making turnover worthy mistakes. It was sailing the ball out of bounds. Don't get me wrong, he might right the ship. It's something that gives me a little pause.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I only have the Texans scoring 16 points. I don't think that they're going to go out there and play a bunch. I just think that this is more indicative of I do think the Texans are going to not dominate defensively, but they are going to play a really good defensive game. But the argument for the Patriots is just as strong as the argument for the Texans. It's a true 50-50 game for me. And while the Texans don't actually they run like about league average rates in man coverage, they run a lot of pattern match quarters, a lot of quarter half stuff. Like it's practically man coverage at a certain point. So and they also run a lot of cover three, like every team. Side thing, Brett Coleman did a great video about this, by the way. A lot of people have been complaining about the rise in too high, and that's why we don't have these awesome passers anymore. It's still cover three. It's just disguised cover three. Like teams still run about the same amount of cover three. Go watch. He talks about it a lot better than I ever could. But go watch that video. Um, it, every team runs mostly cover three in zone. Not most, but most teams they run cover three the most of any coverage. Texans do too. I honestly can't tell you as much why they struggle against scrambles. It just seems like their guys' backs are turned at the wrong time, and I haven't watched every single one of the Texans games, so I can't fully tell you why. But it's strange. I'm picking the Texans, but I don't feel great about it. Patriots were my Super Bowl pick. Well, they weren't my Super Bowl champion, but I picked them to come out of the AFC. I don't feel good about this. And another reason, like May will be better in this game. Like you said, he's resilient as hell. I picked them to go to the Super Bowl because I thought once May gets a playoff win under his belt, there's just nothing that's going to be stopping him. He's going to get that confidence going. So we'll see. This is just going to be really fun to see because either way, if the Texans win this game, in this type of a script, that's just going to cement further how elite of a unit this defense is. If May wins this game and the Patriots pull this one off, that's just going to be another point in the favor of Mike Vrabel as a great coach, of Drake May as a great quarterback. We got a lot of storylines going into this one. A big game, and honestly, winner of this has a good chance to go to the Super Bowl. Yeah, they're going to the AFC Championship. Of course, they have a good chance to go to the Super Bowl, but I mean, at this point, I think both of these teams could win the Super Bowl. Not just could win the Super Bowl. I think that the winner of this game is probably my favorite to go to the AFC. I think both of these teams I like in a game matchup against the Broncos or the Bills. That's what I'm trying to say.
If I've done my math right, these two teams have combined for 24 wins in their last 25 games.
Oh, that's awesome.
That is
the
insane.
only loss is to the Bills.
Yep.
Wow. All right, we got one more game.
Yep. It is the LA Rams who won a nail biter against the Carolina Panthers. What an absolutely entertaining game that was.
We'll talk about the Panthers later.
And we're gonna talk about the Bears now. Unfortunately, Rams are favored by 4. I don't really want to touch anything that involves the Chicago Bears, so why don't you lead this one off?
Yeah, I can take this one. So, man, I'm not going to talk too much about what happened last week because Jesus fucking Christ. But I'm going to come out and just say I'm going to pick the Rams 30-24. I think this will probably be the highest scoring game out of the bunch. I think a lot of the other 3 games I'm predicting to be somewhat defensive battles, possession heavy, points are a premium. I don't think this is necessarily going to be like that because the weaknesses of both of these teams are on the defense. We saw it last week. I mean, the Bears got 27 points put up on them, and it probably should have been more. The Packers just did not run the ball well last week, and they still did all of that. I mean, okay, we're going to talk about Packers later. I cannot believe that Jordan Love performance got wasted. Oh man, Jordan Love put together one of the great playoff performances of his career. Got wasted. Anyway, Packers didn't run the ball well. The Rams will run the ball well. This is a great running team. They've got an incredible offensive line that will move guys, and the Bears have been extremely susceptible to movement. They haven't dug their ground really well. They haven't like made it tough for running backs to get yards. The Rams will basically be able to get whatever they want on the ground. I think where this really comes down to is if Stafford can play like the MVP level that he's been playing like it this season, I honestly don't think this is that close of a game. Probably at least a touchdown win or more for the Rams because the Bears just don't have it on defense to beat Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams while also having to stop this run game. And with Matthew Stafford, if he's playing an elite level, making these tough throws, making these great reads, looking guys off at an elite level, tricking these Bears safeties, it's going to be a long day for the Bears secondary, for the Bears front. This defense is going to have a tough time. The offense is just going to have to carry. And I think it's definitely possible, but I'm really worried about the left tackle situation for the Bears. Ozzie Trapillo goes down. I'm not sure who replaces him this week. It's either going to be Braxton Jones coming back from injury or the third stringer Theo Benedict. And I don't think either of those guys are up to the task of defending Jared Verse or Byron Young. Rashawn Gary got his like last week. He was all over the place, making Caleb Williams nervous all day. I think Jared Verse and Byron Young are going to be able to do that. They're going to be able to get pressure off that edge. It is going to come down to, again, can Caleb Williams make those crazy plays, escape the pocket, be that elite playmaker? He will be. He will get his. And against a secondary that's clearly questionable, like they made some mistakes last week. They were kind of getting gashed. I think there's a lot of avenues for points for the Bears here. I think this will be a really close game because the Bears are also going to put up a lot of points. I think my X factor in this game is going to be the guy who had a massive game last week, Colson Loveland. There was one point during the game where I think Al Michaels said, or Kirk Herbstreit said, that everybody on the field knows it's going to Colson Loveland. It's just about, can you figure out a way to stop it? And he was dominant. And I don't see a reason that doesn't continue. There's not really a guy on the Rams I think can cover him in man. I don't think they're going to run a lot of man. They don't have the horses to run man in the back end. All right. So, but in zone, he's just shown a great ability to find the hole, sit down in the coverage, and really make himself available to Caleb Williams. So when Caleb Williams running around, making those scrambles, he's got a safety net in Loveland. If he can have another big game, that's the Bears' path to victory. However, I think the Rams they got too much of an easy path in front of them offensively. They're going to win this game, go to the NFC Championship.
I agree with you. Even after a performance where we almost saw an early exit for the Rams, I'm going to hold on to the take that the only team that can reliably beat them is the Rams themselves. I mean, there were missed opportunities for LA in that game. I think Stafford threw a pretty bad interception, didn't he?
He did. Yeah, no, it was a meatball to Mike Jackson. Though, to be fair, Mike Jackson had one of the better cover 3 ball hawk plays I've ever seen.
Mike Jackson in cover 3 is weirdly one of the most dominant cornerbacks in the NFL. And I don't really know how to explain that. It's just the perfect player scheme combination there. Him and J.C. Horn, Carolina has their guys for their scheme. There's talk of firing Ejiro Evero because he ran prevent defense.
I know.
Don't fucking run prevent defense, but no, he does too much for that defense. He is stellar.
No, I'd sooner promote him to head coach than fire him.
But here's the other thing for the Rams. Stafford airmailed Puka Nacua on what should have been a touchdown, I remember. And
Puka also dropped a touchdown.
Yeah, Puka dropped a touchdown. That's just it. They should have had even more points, and they dropped 34 on this Panthers defense that doesn't really have the horses. Well, the Bears defense isn't that much of an upgrade. They are kind of similar to the Panthers in that they are a really well-coached unit, but like you said, LA is going to get theirs on the ground. They're an extremely high success run game, and the Bears are an extremely easy front to have successful runs against. The one thing that does make me a little nervous for the Rams' sake is when you got Caleb Williams playing the way he is right now and Ben Johnson. I mean, you always have a chance for some extremely efficient offensive games, and the Rams almost did it again where they play short football games with not all that many possessions, and it can give inferior competition a chance as long as that competition still plays a pretty solid game and they get hot. The Bears absolutely have that chance, I think, for Chicago to win. They're going to need a big Rams mistake or two, but we've seen that has a chance to happen. I am going to pick the Rams 31-28, but I would be nervous if I was a Rams fan.
Yeah, and another thing that it's easy for them to make mistakes offensively and defensively, but the killer this season has been special teams. Like they have just been atrocious, and for all of the Bears' faults, they've made a few big plays on special teams. Like they have had a few moments where they really a few moments of brilliance, and I think one of those paired with a bad Rams mistake could turn this tide and make this a really close game. And the Bears are a team that you can never really count out, as we learned last week. Um, they're just going to put pedal to the metal in the second half, and they're going to make this one close. I do think that, but I don't mean to further knock the nails into the coffin, but I don't think Sean McVay is going to call as passive of a game as Matt LaFleur did last week in the second half. If the Rams do go up, I don't think he's going to make the same game management mistakes. I think Sean McVay's a clearly better coach, and we'll get to Matt LaFleur and the Packers in a minute here, but I think McVay's a clearly better coach. I don't think he's going to give Chicago the avenue to come back if they do indeed go down early. So if the Bears do want to win this game, they're going to need 4 quarters of play. However, I think the biggest X factor in this game for me is going to come down to if the Rams come out shirtless in the pregame warmups, it's over. Bears win. Bears win. You cannot be pulling this gimmick in the year of 2026. All right. We cannot be pulling this. Come out in your hoodies and your parkas. Be prepared to play in the cold weather. All right. I can't see it.
You come out shirtless and you develop ice in the veins, but not like clutch ice in the veins, just ice in your
freeze
veins.
on the field.
And you're having a bad time. Yep. I agree with you on that one. Look, the tough guy aesthetic, there's something to be said for that. But there's also something to be said for not being absolutely miserable in the Chicago cold, because what is this game going to be like? 5 degrees with wind? It's supposed to be pretty bad. And this is a Los Angeles football team, so that's real home field advantage there.
But yeah, but also I think the Rams have only played like 2 games in a dome this year, so they have played in some cold weather games as well.
Yeah, I agree with you that this is the Rams' game to lose. It's just the Bears have been in a lot of situations where it looked like they were down and out. It was the other team's game to lose, you could say.
Yep.
And they wound up coming back and beating that other team. So that's why I think it'll at least be close.
Yeah, man, who knows with all these games? But those are our predictions for the divisional round. So I've got Texans Bills in the AFC Championship and Seahawks Rams in the NFC Championship. Hey, listen, if that happens, that means 3 of my 4 original picks are right. We'll take that. My conference championships are still intact.
I don't even remember who I had in the conference championships. That was such a regrettable spur of the moment thing.
I edited the video. I'm sure I remember. Oh gosh, you had the Broncos going to the Super Bowl. I forget who they played though.
They're still alive.
Jaguar? Did they play the Jaguars?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. It was Broncos Jags in the AFC for you, and I think it was also, it might have actually been Rams Bears in the NFC Championship.
Yeah, I believe so. Yep.
Yeah, because you had the Bears beat the Eagles. Yeah. So 2 of those one of those happens this week. Interesting.
Okay, so Jaguars post-mortem. This is a tough loss if you're a Jags fan, because look, they had opportunities, and they had opportunities to knock Josh Allen out in the first round and keep up that momentum and really have heat to make a Super Bowl run. That's disappointing. And you're always worried about the sophomore slump with year 2. I mean, we saw that with the Commanders this year, but I think there were other factors going into that where you're not as worried for the Jaguars. This is a roster that I think is only going to get better. This is a quarterback who I think should only be building more chemistry with his receivers going forward, and an offensive play caller that should be building more chemistry with the guys that he's calling plays for. There's a lot of reason to be optimistic if you're a Jags fan, but hey, when you got a good roster and you got good coaches and things are going right and you lose in the playoffs, NFL is a fickle league, so no guarantee to make it back.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the Dan Campbell graphic of this might have been our only chance after the Niners NFC Championship losses made the rounds after seemingly every playoff loss of a decent team. And yeah, this might have been their only chance, especially in a week overall league this year. Like there have just been a lot more good, not great teams. The Jags really could have won a Super Bowl if they'd won this game, and they were a couple plays away. Like they convert that 4th and 2. If Lawrence's shin doesn't go down, they might have won this game. So it's really tough to say that it obviously this year was not a failure. This year was a massive success. If you tell the Jags that they go 13-4, win the division, they lose a close one to Josh Allen and the Bills in the wild card before the season, they're taking this. Like this is a great year for them, and you're gonna get like Brian Thomas. Hopefully, will be healthy next year, and hopefully he'll return closer to rookie year form. So that will hopefully be something. You got Parker Washington is a stud, by the way. He's one of my favorite prospects ever coming out. I loved him as a prospect. I think I had like a round 1 through 2 grade on him. And he went in the 6th round. I was so disappointed. Never wrong, just early. I'm telling you, man. He's always been that guy. You can't be upset with the season. It's the Jags. You got your head coach. You got your DC. Probably won't be your defense coordinator for that much longer. Campanelli's going to get a job. I think he already got interviewed for the Dolphins job today. So you can't be too disappointed. Trevor Lawrence showed you a lot of jumps, a lot to like. It is just a tough way to go out, though.
Okay, so you mentioned Trevor Lawrence's shin going down. This is a take that I've been developing since about the mid-season point. I have actually become very in favor of taking the points in your opponent's red zone, even if the analytics, obviously 4th and 1 on the goal line, 99% of the time, you got to go for that because the expected value of converting, you want to convert over half the time in that situation, is just abjectly higher than kicking a field goal from that spot. However, 4th and 2 from what was it, like their 8-yard line ish?
Yep. Yeah.
I'm in favor of kicking the points because assuming your operation is even adequate, you are guaranteeing that you're going to put up points on the board. And there are 2 reasons that I think are somewhat analytically sound why I'm in favor of that. The first one, and this might sound like a really minor factor, but people got to realize that the analytics say to go for it in that spot. It's like, what, a 0.5% boost in win probability for a lot
Yep.
of these decisions. You are playing on the margins. Going for it on 4th down systematically increases your variance. And so you are going to have more games where you put up points that you don't need, essentially. I'm trying to get this across in the most intuitive manner, and I'm going to struggle with it. But if you're a super 4th down heavy team and say you convert on 3 4th downs for touchdowns instead of kicking field goals, then you've added 12 surplus points and you might not need all those points because the game was already in hand. And on the other end of the spectrum, you increase the amount of games where you drop an uncompetitive amount of points. Like, for example, what the Chicago Bears would have done because Packers never should have taken their foot off the gas, never should have given them opportunity. So it increases the amount of time that you score, say 10, and you kick a field goal, it's more likely that you're going to need all those points. I explained that badly, but I think there's some analytical backing to that. It increases your standard deviation. And the other aspect that I like is kicking field goals enables you to make more choices later in the game because you wind up getting pressed into fewer spots where you have to go for it on 4th and long. I mean, what do people always say? You're going to need those points later. And it's,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you go for it on 4th down and you score a touchdown. And that's great. But if you don't get anything out of a drive, then oftentimes it turns into a 2-score game. And that really clips your wings as far as your coaching choices later in the game. Or you have to go for an extra 2-point conversion. And so that makes you forces you to make an unideal choice. Or it's a 1-possession game when it should be tied, and now you've got to go for it on 4th and 8. So I think that kicking more field goals keeps the consistent pressure on, keeps your offense rolling, and enables you to outcoach your opponent more consistently later in games. I'm still super aggressive in terms of go for it at midfield because punting is an extremely difficult skill and there's only so much you can do to limit the amount of touchbacks. I'm extremely pro go for it on 4th and short in your own territory. Again, because you punt from there and sometimes it gets blocked. Sometimes you open up a long return. You want to keep drives alive. But when you get into the red zone, I say a kick, I say a take the points, and especially in the first half, I am thinking in terms of scoring consistency. Second half, I'm thinking more about, you know, really like playing football, playing for scores, and
Possessions
thinking
left,
about
yeah.
how the game script, yeah, how it's going to unfold early on. I just want the points. I want all my options open in the second half.
I think that's a really good argument for taking the points, and I am really in analytics myself, and I know the math behind this, and you're completely right. A lot of these analytics say go for it. It's like it adds a 0.5% win probability. That's why I think analytics it's really good and it's a very helpful tool. And obviously, this isn't the only thing that it does. It doesn't just tell you go for it or kick the field goal or punt. Like there are a million things that data can help NFL teams do, but in situations like that, it has to be up to the discretion of the coach. More as the analytics give you a plus 0.7% win probability, that doesn't do much for you. The coach has to make the decision themselves. It's just like, okay, the analytics just don't help on this. It's if it's like a 5%, then I think that's probably something you go for, unless apart from extreme circumstances. I think there has to be something similar to like if any of you are familiar with political polling, there's a margin for error, right? Generally a 3% margin for error in a candidate's polling of favorability or whatever. There has to be something similar to that in analytics, and I'm sure there are among the advanced data analysis people. They will present something of a margin for error and saying, all right, this is close, so you don't need to put as much value into that. Um, and I think it's a really interesting discussion to have, especially in considering that situation. Jags up 7-3 in the red zone. They'd been rolling the entire time. The run game was running really well. I mean, they just couldn't really be stopped. I think that was the right decision. I think that they should have gone for that because what happens there? You miss, that's all right. Now the Bills are stranded inside their own 10, and your defense has done a solid job. And if you get it, you need to get 2 yards with a team that's running really well. You get a touchdown and you go 14-3 early, and you make the Bills play from behind, a very talent deficient Bills offense. You make them play from behind and beat you by making those big time plays. You force Allen to take more risks, and I think that's a great way to win. Because yeah, you look at it later in the game, say, yeah, we could have really used those 3 points. We could have also really used 7 points. If they had gotten those 7 points there, they would have been up 34-31 after the touchdown. So Bills would have needed to go for the onside kick. If they had taken the 3 points there, what happens? They would have. It's 30-30 again. Great. Trevor Lawrence throws a pick on the first play anyway. That just happens. They need points either way on that drive, and they just need a field goal on that drive as well. Trevor Lawrence is still going to throw a pick, you know. So, and then the Bills get the ball in Jacksonville territory with 45 seconds left, and they can kick it for the win. Why you lost that game wasn't because you went for it. You lost that game because of a bad bounce on the last play of the game. You lost that game because Josh Allen had a great throw down the field. You didn't lose that game because Trevor Lawrence was a half a yard short on fourth down. So there is no problem with taking the points, but I also don't think that there is a problem with going for it there.
Okay, so before my headphones died, or excuse me, my earbuds, and I had to go out into the cold Illinois winter to get these headphones, I was talking about how teams will get an opportunity with 30 seconds and a timeout, say, and they're starting at their 25-yard line, and either they'll just straight up kneel it out and not even pose a threat, or they'll just run a draw or stock inside zone. In the NFL, you don't have the luxury of just surrendering competitive possessions like that. And the Jags were in a similar situation to that before halftime, and they didn't give away that possession. And they got Cam Little a shot for a 54-yard field goal, which is a very high percentage kick for Cam Little, and he missed. So that's why nobody's talking about it, because those were points that could have ended up mattering.
Yep.
Like you mentioned, T-Law probably does throw that bad interception still, and it's still probably the Bills game. But those were three undoubtedly crucial points that they should have had because they got aggressive before the half. So I don't know if that constitutes an analytics thing, but drives matter. I think that's what NFL football is about. It is about cashing in drives. You can't afford to throw them away.
I absolutely think that is an analytical argument as well, because you're arguing whenever you're kneeling or you're running a draw play, you're arguing that there is a higher chance of them scoring points than you scoring points if you go full out trying to score points. And for most teams, I just don't think that's realistic, especially with how Lawrence is playing. And obviously they ended up getting a decent shot at points out of it. So also it was extremely questionable as to whether they should have had that chance to get points. I think he got the snap off in time, but it was so close. We can't really tell. So I'm kind of glad he didn't hit it, so we didn't have to listen to the discourse. But um, Bills have to change another rule to accommodate them. But no, I think there's absolutely analytical discourse there as well. But one more thing I'd like to touch on in this debate is that the momentum side of things. There are a lot of analytics guys who say um, momentum isn't real. I disagree with them heavily. I think anybody who's ever played a sport competitively knows that momentum is absolutely a real thing. And I think when you try to define this in a experiment or in an analytical way, you're saying, well, there's no difference in how teams play when they have momentum versus how they're not. Okay, I'm probably not going to be able to describe this well, but I think the problem with that is you're using the data set that you are training on, the drives where they do like well, and when teams start to pull away, you're not factoring that you're factoring that as like okay, that just happens, that's something that happens, when that is actually the product of momentum. When teams go on runs, part of that a lot of the times is momentum. So when you're factoring in momentum into your control, your base data set, of course momentum isn't going to significantly change anything in your test set. So you're not going to come away with the idea that okay, momentum is a significantly important thing that moves the needle, because momentum is present in every single snap of football. So you cannot possibly differentiate it by separating it between train and test data sets. And that's how a lot of research projects into the idea of momentum and if it affects NFL teams work. That's how they do it. And I just disagree with that method of thinking. Now, I know that's a lot of analytical bullshit for you, but I had to get that off of my chest because I think the analytics guys are just as stupid as the guys who say, yeah, you always take the points, never go for it. So the hardcore analytic guys, sometimes y'all can get a little bit out there with your stuff. So rein it in. But there is absolutely something to be said for momentum, and losing that momentum when you miss the kick or when you don't get the fourth down, you lose that momentum. Whereas if you kick the field goal, you get to keep some of that momentum. If you score a touchdown there, you get so much more momentum than if you were to just merely kick the field goal. You're up 2 possessions. You dominated. You score in your first 2 possessions. You converted a big-time fourth down. That adds momentum. So again, it's the same argument of it's expected points added, expected momentum added. It's the same analytical argument again. So I don't think momentum plays as much of a factor into it because you're not accounting for the stuff that you can get for getting it. It is just a more risky move. If you don't like risk and if you want to play safe, it is perfectly fine to take the kick. But people saying you have to take the points are not accounting for the fact that, yeah, you might lose some games, but you're also going to win some games you never had business winning in the first place. Jags lose this game whether they take those 3 or whether they don't get it at all. I believe that. According to the script of the game, how it went, they still lose this game. If they go for the points, they win. I think that's why there is a valid argument to going for it there.
And momentum is not some mysterious thing either.
Yeah.
The way that I look at it is momentum is just the assumption in everybody's mind of what is going to happen. When you're clicking, when you're heating up, you are assuming when the ball leaves your hand or when you're looking the ball in or when you're covering the guy in front of you that you are going to have the successful outcome. And when you are cold, you've got that feeling in the back of your head that something is about to go wrong. We've all experienced it. And just because these guys are pros who are specialists at shutting out the noise does not mean that they are unaffected by it. So yeah, I am very much a momentum is real guy as well. You can't use it to go completely against the data, which obviously is not what you're arguing for.
Exactly. And I think a lot of it is just also confidence. Momentum is just a team, like you said, a team having confidence in themselves and the other team not having confidence. And if you did a study on how well players play when they are confident versus when they're not, obviously that's not something you can really accurately track. If you did that, players play better when they're confident. It is just a documented thing. Everybody knows it. Everybody who's played knows. Every coach has said, yeah, you got to be confident. If you want to win games, you got to be confident. Because if you hesitate, especially in football, where it's the common mantra is don't think, just do. Confidence is key, and momentum plays a massive part of that.
I love having these conversations because I think we both have a lot of sort of meta takes that don't get discussed a lot. Exactly. So these are good combos.
The way that analytics is talked about in mainstream media is just criminal. So I'm glad we can kind of come out here and set the record straight.
Okay, so next up on the agenda was 49ers Seahawks, and so we're talking about the team the 49ers knocked off, which is the Philadelphia Eagles.
Oh man, that's a tough loss, you know, to a Niners team that isn't very good. But if you win this game, it's a different story than the Jags. Because the Jags lost to a really good team. Well, a team that could win a lot of games in this playoff. If the Jags won that game, there's a real argument they would have won the Super Bowl. I mean, the way they played in that game, how well they did against a great team, they could have won the Super Bowl. Eagles are not winning the Super Bowl this year. If they win that game or not, they're just not. They're losing in the next round, no matter who they play. This was we talk about momentum. It felt like all year, even when they were winning and getting points, they had momentum going against them. They had no confidence. It felt like everything was going to go wrong at any given moment. And I think a lot of that can be attributed to the recently fired Kevin Patullo. The offense just never went off the ground. It was an extremely conservative, extremely passive offense that when they got a lead, they just took the took their foot off the gas and then they just let teams come back. And that's just not a way to win football games. And realistically, in the passing game, they weren't making the best out of Jalen Hurts' big arm and his accurate deep balls. They were kind of just dink and dunk, get a couple yards here and there, and try to run the ball ineffectively. Run, AJ Brown deep ball, punt. Has a lot of truth to it. So Patullo's gone, but when you really look back on the season, look back over the last few seasons, there has to be a question now that you ask. Because it's tough. Jalen Hurts is your franchise guy, but you have to ask yourself, I think you really have to define exactly what you need to be a winning football team with him, because they didn't do it with Brian Johnson as their offensive coordinator. They didn't do it with Kevin Patullo as their offensive coordinator. They did it with Steichen, and they did it with Kellen Moore. You need to define what you need out of this offense and have clear expectations of what scheme you want to run for your offensive coordinator. And I think partly why that hasn't been executed well in Philadelphia over the past couple of years is because Nick Sirianni just isn't a great head coach. I think there's an argument that he should have been fired last year. Obviously, you're not firing a head coach off of a Super Bowl, but he just doesn't really do much for this team. He doesn't call plays, and you don't need to call plays to be a great head coach. Mike Vrabel's a great head coach. He doesn't call plays. Shout out to the Patriots defensive coordinator. I think Zach Kerr, after Terrell Williams diagnosed with cancer early in the season, he can't call plays anymore. He steps up. I think he was an assistant. He steps up, calls the plays. He's doing a great job. But Nick Sirianni doesn't call plays on either side of the ball. As a coach, it doesn't seem like he is the culture builder archetype, but how well has that worked out for them? I'm not sure. It doesn't seem like they have a great culture in Philly all the time. It seems like the positivity rabbit's doing more work than he is. So if he doesn't provide that, I mean, you saw him go over and yell at AJ Brown the second he made a mistake. It is AJ Brown, and they've had some issues with him throughout the year, but it's not a good look from a head coach. I'm really asking myself all of what he provides to this team and why he should keep his job, because I feel like this is a great team. A lot of head coaches would win games with him. I don't know if this is the year to fire him, but if you have another year like that, if you miss on an offensive coordinator again, even if you go to the playoffs, but you lose in a similar fashion, I think there's a real argument to fire Sirianni right now. And I think there's a real argument that actually might be had and discussed in Philadelphia circles, especially with Howie Roseman, the GM. He's not afraid to take risks if we see another year similar to this.
I completely agree with you. I think that Sirianni is a bottom 5 head coach in the NFL. I think you can make an argument that he's a bottom 3 head coach in the NFL.
Yeah. Now, there are only 23 head coaches in the league right now, so.
Okay, I'll say bottom 3 at the beginning of this season, maybe. I mean, okay, he's better than Callahan. He's maybe better than Pete Carroll was. I don't know. It's really hard.
I think you go Zach Taylor.
I mean, he also took his team to a Super Bowl because Zach Taylor actually calls offensive plays for you, and a good offensive play caller is like literally the number 1 asset in football. It's up there, and I would even put it above a franchise quarterback. And Zach Taylor kind of holds you back in that phase. So you get into the quarterback conversation where it's like this guy's good, but is he good enough to maximize that surplus value and win a Super Bowl? What I know about Nick Sirianni is that I don't think he actually does anything for Philadelphia. You won a Super Bowl last year with an offensive play caller who is able to drag a terrible Saints offense in terms of roster construction to competence behind a rookie quarterback and a defensive play caller who coaches one of the absolutely most cohesive defenses in the league,
Hmm.
and you have the best GM in football working magic every single year to make you competitive. And what do you contribute? You turn a team with Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley and recently Zach Bond, who seem like outstanding locker room guys, into a team with a really bad culture where everyone just seems mad on the offense more so than any other team I've seen. The frustration in that Eagles offense is just so obvious, and it's not just AJ Brown. It's the offensive line and guys yelling at each other after they miss assignments. It's going in with that assumption that something is going to go wrong that we talked about earlier. I don't know what Nick Sirianni does that adds value to the Eagles. And as football fans, we always have this tendency to say he's the head coach. Their team has a great win-loss percentage under his tenure. Yeah, but why don't we look at some of the other variables and some of the guys who have clearly contributed to that success? I don't think that we can put that on Sirianni. So, yeah, I'm right there with you. And this was a wasted year because they coached a terrible offense under a guy that he hired in Kevin Patullo. And just to clarify things a little bit on what was so bad about the offensive coaching, it was the limited creativity, sure, but I think the two core problems with Kevin Patullo is that the play installation was very bad. We
Yep.
particularly saw that with their blocking schemes, and the sequencing was so incredibly mediocre. It's like, okay, we have to hit our AJ Brown deep ball quota. So what are we going to do? Are we going to scheme him up on a post wheel or a double move or something of that nature? Are we gonna like the Rams did last week? Are we gonna start him in the backfield and then put trips on one side and run off the coverage and run him up the seam and get him an open look? Nope. We're gonna put him out there on the boundary, isolated, and we're just gonna have Jalen Hurts chuck it to him, whether he's open or
Exactly.
not. We live in an efficiency league. You need to drop good looks. The Eagles had none of that this year, and that's what sunk them.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. The sequencing was terrible. Now, I'm not going to pretend to be an offensive genius or anything. Like I know exactly how to sequence play calls, but you can tell when someone's doing it right. Like for example, like you gave a great example last week, Bills Jags. Bills had run a tunnel screen and just a straight up regular screen to Khalil Shakir a few times in that game. They get into the red zone. What do? They fake the screen to Khalil Shakir. They run it out and up with the tight end. They fit it into that system. They bring the defense down because they'd seen it before. They were expecting that, and you use their expectations against them. That's what offensive coordinators try to do. And you just didn't really see much of a connection between Kevin Batullo's plays. When you start to watch a lot of tape, offensive tape, you realize I saw that same formation a couple plays ago, and then they do a different thing with this. They add a new wrinkle with that, and it just there's some of that in every. That's how you game plan, but it just didn't seem like there was a lot of creativity behind that. It just didn't seem like whenever they tried to add those wrinkles in, it didn't really work. And the down by down play stuff, guys weren't always doing the right things. They didn't look like they knew what they were supposed to do. And I'm not going to put that on them when we're seeing everybody do it, especially an offensive line that is extremely competent among the other coordinators that they've had in the past. Even Brian Johnson, this offensive line was decently competent. So definitely issues. He deserved to be fired. He was not just a scapegoat. But you can also make the argument that there were a few times in this game and every game where, yeah, tear guys open. He schemes guys open, and Jalen Hurts, he just didn't see him, or he didn't see him, or maybe he did see him and he doesn't pull the trigger, or he does pull the trigger and he's just missed him. Hurts did not help him. All right, Jalen Hurts is an extremely difficult quarterback to win with if you are not a great offensive mind. If you are a great offensive mind, then you know how to work with him, and Jalen Hurts can make the throws when you put him in the right positions. But if you can't and you ask him to elevate an offense, I think he struggles with that. So unless you have kind of a head coach for the offense and a head coach for the defense, like they had with Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio last year, I think this Eagles team is going to struggle. You're in a position defensively right now where it doesn't look like Vic Fangio is in a super big rush to take another head coaching job. You probably got him as the DC until he retires. You got to figure out an offensive plan. You got to lay out a game plan. How do we want to approach this offensively so we don't see another season like this?
When you put it that way, I can see why there was so much just chucking up of 9 routes and a posts and bang eights in this Eagles
Yeah.
offense because Jalen Hurts is not a quarterback that gets through progressions.
Yeah.
And Hurts is not a quarterback with outstanding pocket presence to use his mobility to actually extend plays and get guys open. He uses his mobility to scramble, and a lot of the times he uses his mobility to break the first sack and then go down on the second sack because he should have kept his eyes up and he should have thrown the ball. So Hurts is kind of a tough quarterback to scheme around. You really do need everything to be perfect. He's kind of like a catapult type of passer where he's like mobile artillery where you either win with him on the move or you win by having him launch the projectile downfield early in the down. There's not a whole lot of in between with Jalen Hurts. You really do need that type of offensive mind that can get him the perfect looks.
That's also a great analogy because if if the catapult hits, that's a lot of damage. If it misses, that's a whole lot of nothing. All right. So it works both ways. Oh man.
All right, that was the Philadelphia Eagles. Next up, we have the Houston Texans and the New England Patriots. So that means the Pittsburgh Steelers and the LA Chargers. And why don't you start on the Pittsburgh Steelers? Because I have a little bit of a Chargers rant I want to go on.
All right. So Pittsburgh, there's really not much to say here. They had the same season they've had for like the last 7 years or something, and it we don't really have much to say as far as what do they need to change because they changed it. Mike Tomlin is gone. I don't know if that was probably necessary, and it's not because I think Mike Tomlin is a bad coach by any measure. I think he's probably a really good coach. It's just they have been delaying rebuilding for the longest time simply because they could. They can make the playoffs because Mike Tomlin can really rah this team. He knows how to develop players, especially defensively. This defense is always great, and that he's a big reason for that. But it was just never quite good enough because they never could get a high enough pick and they could never get a quarterback and they could never really retool. And they've missed a couple of times. You just need to go into a kind of a full rebuild, and that's what they're going to do next year because they don't have a quarterback answer. It looks like Rodgers is probably going to retire. Defensively, your best players, TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, Jalen Ramsey starting to deteriorate. You're going to need to retool there. You have a couple of nice young pieces. Joey Porter Jr., we talked about him in the Pro Bowl episode. He's a heck of a player. Alex Highsmith and Nick Herbig are still great. Keanu Benton looks up and coming. He's had a good year. And then offensively, you've got good pieces on the offensive line. The Font now is heads up and downs, but he's looked good. Sumalo, Mason McCormick, Zach Frazier. Like you have a somewhat good offensive line, but there are just key holes you need to address. And with Tomlin going, you kind of finally get the suffering from mild success out of the way. And now you're just going to suffer for a bit, but you're going to retool. So there's not much to say about this team other than this is probably the last year we see that Pittsburgh brand of football of 10-7 and a bad wild card loss until it becomes 10-7 bad wild card loss with hope for the next year.
I think that Mike Tomlin stepping away from the team was really the best outcome for everybody
Yeah,
because he gets to retain his never having a losing season.
that's
Like
so
he gets
awesome.
to likely end his NFL career with that accolade. That is insane. Well, at the same time, Steelers fans and the Steelers organization, they get that what they want as well. They get higher upside moving forward. And like you covered, this doesn't have to be like a lose 13 games next year type of rebuild. They have talent on offense and defense. They still have a really strong foundation in the trenches. And I think trench play is one of the big factors in accelerating rebuilds because when your quarterback and your running back and just your all around playmaking talent isn't great, then a good offensive line can't take you very far. But all of a sudden, a couple dominoes fall into place, and now you are one of the best teams in the NFL because you have a good offensive line, or you are one of the best defenses in the NFL because your secondary has just become good enough. I don't think this has to be a long rebuild for the Steelers, but here's the thing. I still have some questions about that coaching staff and that front office and who
Oh
is
yeah.
really capping the Steelers' upside because we know what Tomlin was clearly doing from a culture perspective and raising the floor, but was that culture really holding them to 10-7 every season? Was his impact on the front office and deciding what players they bring in, was that really stopping them from, bringing in more explosive talent that raises
No.
their ceiling? That's still something that they've got to prove. And that's why I like his decision to step away. I especially like it for him because now he's not going to get blamed after every wild card loss, but still a lot to prove moving forward in Pittsburgh. I don't think this is a catch-all solution.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think what I'm kind of getting at is that Tomlin has given this team an excuse of we're contending, so we need to keep these specific players around. We need to not retool because we need to keep the team chemistry because culture is such a strong part of this team. We need to keep these guys around. Now Tomlin's not here. You're not competing anymore. Like realistically, next year you're not contending. You don't have the horses. This will reveal a lot about your GM if he kind of has the tools. I always forget his name um, off the top of my head, but he is not a very aggressive GM. There really haven't been many great moments for him to hang his hat on. Do you have his name?
Omar Khan.
Omar Khan. Yeah, Omar Khan. He's not really that impressive of GM. Now's your time to go out there and say, "This is why I'm a general manager of an NFL team," and retool this team because it's not that hard of a job. Like you need to find a quarterback, and that's really difficult. But other than that, you've got a lot of great foundation, like you touched on. This just gives you an excuse to retool this team. Trade TJ Watt, maybe. Cam Hayward, let him play out the remainder of his career. It's not really a big thing, but you can trade some of the older guys on your team and try to build this team from a younger standpoint. Try to get those good trench pieces and build up from your younger guys. Give them the keys to the franchise. And
Okay.
also from this, we do get Mike Tomlin most likely going on TV, and that's gonna be a ball. All right, he's made for
It's going to
TV.
be fantastic. All right. Now I want to go on just a mini Chargers rant. I know you feel the same way about the LA Chargers' recent playoff loss. Oh my God, Victor, what a terrible game from Justin Herbert.
Yeah, yeah, that was bad.
It was heartbreaking to see because it felt like he was beating some of the allegations this
My
season. I
goat is
mean,
washed.
um, was it the first game of the year where he hangs tough with the Chiefs and ultimately walks that one off, making a
Yeah.
statement against a team that had Super Bowl expectations and a team that's always won the one score game. I mean, you can make an argument that Justin Herbert sunk the Kansas City Chiefs season, starting them off on that bad note. I wouldn't make that argument, but
And
just
Justin
saying.
Herbert personally injured Patrick Mahomes in their second game. So
It felt like he was finally clearing that hump, and
yeah,
it felt like he had a real chance to be a tier one quarterback going into next year if he proved some stuff in the playoffs. And I was confident in the Chargers that they had a real chance to pull off the upset in that game, as I think they were like 4.5 point underdogs because Herbert had played behind a bad offensive line the entire season. He was used to it. He was throwing haymakers regardless of having pressure in his face. And then he gets to the playoffs, and it's not just that he wasn't trusting his protection. He was like a G5 college QB in that I swear he was dropping back on passing concepts to run. It was kind of jarring to see. It's
yeah,
like he was imagining pressure. And that's just even when Herbert has been disappointing in moments in the past, which there haven't been all that many disappointing moments for him. It wasn't as bad as it was against the Patriots, who I think were a beatable defense. He was missing throws. He wasn't putting himself in the best position to make those throws. If I'm a Chargers fan, that's kind of a heartbreaker because now you're starting to worry that maybe that's just what playoff Justin Herbert looks like. Maybe he's only going to play at 50% of his regular season powers, and that really worries me moving forward.
yeah. And you'll see a lot of the stat like, okay, but Peyton Manning lost his first three playoff starts, and that is true. And this generation will probably have a Peyton Manning. One of the many quarterbacks that are compared to Peyton Manning will eventually get the playoff thing going. But every generation also needs a Tony Romo, the guy that he's good in the regular season, lights out, sometimes in the MVP conversation, but he's just a playoff dropper. He just kind of, the play is not as good. He panics under playoff pressure, both from the defensive line and overall the way to the game. And that just might be Justin Herbert. Tony Romo never won a Super Bowl, never went to a Super Bowl, I don't believe. Um, and it's very possible Justin Herbert never will either. But I don't know, Wilson. I don't know. He may. We'll see. He might become Justin Herbert. He might become Tony Romo. He might become Peyton Manning. He might be somewhere in the middle, but it definitely gives me concern because I've always thought the playoff dropping was like, okay, you know what? He kind of got screwed over by the defense in the Jags game, and the play calling wasn't very aggressive in that playoff loss a few years ago. And then last year, the Texans, it wasn't a good game, but like it wasn't also that bad, and it was not a good play calling outing from Greg Roman. It wasn't a good play calling outing from Greg Roman again, but there were guys open. There were no excuses for Herbert for some of the plays he made. Yeah, he did not have the best game from his surroundings. You can make excuses if he had converted on those big time plays where he had the available play, but he didn't. Like you said, he was a first read and run at best. It was just kind of a disaster. Hopefully, you bring in Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater back next year. That will give him some more comfortability, and he's not just going to be frightened of getting hit every single play, but you're definitely concerned right now going into next year. You're a team that has playoff expectations, honestly, maybe even Super Bowl expectations because of how good you were this year with so many injuries. Can Justin Herbert bring you there? He's very talented when he's playing at his best, but if he's not playing at his best in the playoffs, it doesn't matter too much.
The other reason that I'm pretty bearish on the Chargers moving forward is we're in a bad era for CEO type head coaches right now. I mean, we just had that conversation with Tomlin. I think that the Ravens were right moving on from John Harbaugh. And we had a lot of good things last year to say about Jim Harbaugh with clearly the culture of toughness that was established. I still think that that's a pretty tangible thing. This is a team that really plays you tough and plays the vast majority of games close, but also with the player development on the defensive side of the ball. And I wonder how much of that is just Jesse Minter being a top 5 to 6 offensive mind in the league and raising your floor and running this meta match quarters very stunt heavy defensive system. I mean, Jesse Minter just does so many things right. What happens when you lose him and you've got to replace him? And how much value is Jim Harbaugh able to contribute then? So, look, I'm not saying that the Chargers are dead or anything like that. Absolutely, they should make the playoffs next year. Absolutely, they should win a playoff game next year if they don't have a bye, but we got to see it from them.
And it's incredibly encouraging in Jim Harbaugh's favor that it's not working with Greg Roman and he fired him. Like they have ties, they have personal ties. So it's very, and it's not like he was a disaster of an offense. Like you can easily just blame this. Both our tackles got hurt and you still fielded a playoff level offense. Like that's just impressive. I don't think Roman did a bad job this year, but I think it was apparent that over the past couple of years, he's not the guy to call this offense. He's not the guy to call for Herbert. I think now letting him go, I trust Jim Harbaugh a lot more to do what's right for the team and not necessarily stick to like, oh, we have to go culture first and foremost. If you're not the play caller, then you're not the play caller. I don't care how good Greg Roman was in the locker room. I'm not saying he was, not saying he wasn't. I'm just saying Harbaugh probably thinks of him as that kind of guy. So it's incredibly encouraging. I think now I'd like to see them bring someone in from the Shanahan West Coast tree where you can kind of like get a lot of stuff happening over the middle, let Justin Herbert sling it into those tight windows and make those plays. Like I think he'd be great for a system like that, and I hope they bring him in. Though I did see today that they brought in Brian Callahan for an interview, so the hopes are somewhat dull.
I didn't even hear that they fired Greg Roman. I do like that decision. I don't think that Roman is a terrible offensive mind, but not the right fit for Justin Herbert. And if you're going to win Super Bowls, you need the guy who works best with your franchise QB.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. And lastly, we had Rams and Bears, which means Panthers and Green Bay. So why don't you take Carolina?
Yeah. All right. So Carolina, I mean, really interesting season because I don't know if you called 8-9 a victory, but it kind of feels like it was, especially because you go 8-9, but then you also like do a really good job in the wild card game against a team that is one of the favorites to go to the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl. We both picked them, and you take them down to the final minute, and it's really the equivalent of, yeah, we didn't win, but damn, we had you shook though. We had you shook though. Like you were quaking in your boots. I saw it. It was a heck of an environment in Charlotte. I mean, oh man, I'm hoping they win the NFC South again because I want to see them get another home playoff game. That was electric. Like the crowd pops were some of the loudest I've ever heard in an NFL stadium. When Bryce Young ran that one in for the touchdown, Like, oh boy, I would have loved to be in that stadium. But it just seems like things are looking up in Carolina. That seems pretty clear, at least right now, that David Canales is the guy. He's your head coach of the future. Ajiro Evero is not going to get a head coaching job unless something goes crazy. And like we both said previously, we really like him as a defensive coordinator. He's done a whole lot with very little. Um, this year, and I don't think how he approached that final drive was the correct call, but I do understand that they had been getting beat over the top all day. I just think he played it a little bit wrong. There was too much time left on the clock for him to let them kind of dink and dunk for 10 yards every play. But he'll learn from that. He's a great DC. He's been that for a few years now. You've got all the pieces in place. And with Bryce Young, this is a really interesting conversation as far as quarterback. We've been talking a lot about quarterbacks and how far can they take you. And I think the difference in quarterback philosophy between Bryce Young and other quarterbacks, I think he kind of falls into a category with Jalen Hurts and Bo Nix, weirdly enough. Not similar players, but they are the guys that on a game by game, down by down basis, they're not necessarily going to win you the game. They're not the best players in the world. They're not top 10. They're somewhere in the 20 to 13 range, right? They're inconsistent. But when it matters, in the fourth quarter, you need a play. You need a bucket. Those three guys are going to go out there and they're going to get you a bucket. Bryce Young makes the big time plays in big time moments. He steps up in big games. He's a playoff riser, apparently. Like, this is a guy who has the clutch factor. He has the it factor. So really, the difference between building around a guy like this and a guy who is a great regular season quarterback but drops in the playoff is that you need to build a great roster, of course, but you're building that great roster to compensate for an inconsistent quarterback in the first three quarters, not an inconsistent quarterback when it comes down to the big games, right? So with a guy like Bryce Young, he can be inconsistent. He can be a somewhat mediocre regular season quarterback, because if you put a good roster around him, they will get you into the playoffs. And once he's in the playoffs, he rises and plays like a great quarterback. And your roster comes together and you can win a Super Bowl like the Eagles did last year. Jalen Hurts played very well in the Eagles' playoff run last year. I think you can go along a similar path like that with the Panthers. And I think Young is, honestly, in a couple of years, I think Young's probably going to be a better quarterback than Hurts will be. Maybe next year. I don't know. But you can make the argument he already is. So there's a lot to discuss for the Panthers next year. Because there are a lot of moves that need to be made on the defense, but this is a franchise going up. You've already got a really nice offensive line. You've got the building blocks on the defensive line. You got a great player in Derek Brown, a couple of nice rookie edge rushers, a couple of great corners like we just talked about, nice receiving weapons. You got you got a decent pick in the draft. Things are looking up in Carolina. Nothing to be sad about for this year. You went out there, you won a division, you brought the playoffs back to Pantherville, to Charlotte. This is a great year, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. Hang your heads high. Hold your heads high.
Man, I just freaking love Bryce Young.
Yeah.
Is he a top 10 QB? I don't think so. Does he have the upside to be a regular season top 10 QB? I don't know if he does. He has one of the weaker arms in the NFL. You definitely see his height play into how he has to manage the pocket at times, but does he give you the upside to just be a baller for 4 games and make some magic happen out of structure, whether that's with his arm or whether that's with his legs? You know what? I think that he does. And there's some shades of Jordan Love here, not in the way that they play, which really is not at all similar, but in that I think I counted out Jordan Love continuing to get better a little too soon when he just had a couple of regular season, some playoff moments as well that were frustrating in years past. Bryce Young can keep getting better. Even if he doesn't have the highest physical ceiling, we probably see a better and slightly more consistent version of Bryce next year. I am not worried about regression for the Panthers because, like you touched on, they have their offensive mind, they have their defensive mind, they have a quarterback that is going to continue to improve, and they got a nice rookie class. I mean, their pass rush can't be any worse next year. They were 32nd in just about every metric down there with the 49ers, and there's a lot of reason to anticipate that it can get better. The chemistry with Tedero McMillan is only going to improve. Yeah, I think the Panthers could be a genuinely dangerous team next season, and you walk out of this season feeling good. I think about as good as you can after you lose a heartbreaker in the playoffs, especially because there's a real chance that you look back and say we got knocked off by the team that won the Super Bowl.
Absolutely. And there's a real chance you look back in 3 years from now, it's like that was the beginning of something special in Carolina. Only thing I'm slightly concerned about is that you did lose Ike Ekwonu for to an Achilles, I believe. So he may not even
Oof,
play next year. Like, and that's
that
your franchise
sucks.
left tackle. Like he's not like the best pass protector or anything, but he's a force in the run game, and he's still your guy at left tackle. It's hard to ask somebody to come in off the street and play left tackle for you, but they've got plenty of cap room. Hopefully they address that.
Okay, well,
Take it
now
away.
Victor. So there's a lot of talk from Packers fans about how we should fire Matt LaFleur and about how he's never going to get the job done. Victor, I don't agree. I talked earlier about how it's dangerous to play the win percentage game with head coaches, but I think that the Packers' win percentage under Matt LaFleur has a lot to do with what a great offensive mind he is, both in terms of getting you buckets in the red zone. I mean, he had a few fantastic play designs that put points up on the board for the Packers. We've had some fourth down frustrations this year, and yes, I wish that he would run out of the gun a little bit less on gotta have it third and fourth and shorts. That is one change I would make to Matt LaFleur's philosophy. But most of the time, when it counts, he's able to come up big. I think that his run game was really handicapped by the Packers' lack of offensive line talent this year. I mean, on the interior, we had zero quality starters after Elton Jenkins went down, and we are without Zach Tom in this one, who is the best run blocker on that offensive line, probably even with Elton Jenkins in there. When the Packers have had better offensive lines in the past, Matt LaFleur's run game has been exceptional, even running out of the gun, which is a very challenging thing schematically to do. I think that he's great at catering his offense to the quarterback that he's playing with. Aaron Rodgers, in those MVP 13 and 3 seasons, was a fantastic quarterback, worthy of MVPs. That was not Aaron Rodgers at the absolute peak of his powers. And we have seen what Rodgers did after he left that LaFleur offense. And yes, did he have freedom to change plays at the line of scrimmage? Sure, but we saw that he changed a bunch of plays when he played for the Jets, and that offense became a disaster. The one who was getting buckets for that offense was Matt LaFleur, and Aaron Rodgers was executing. And once every 5 or 6 passes, he would create some Aaron Rodgers magic. LaFleur gets the best out of a signal caller. Are the late game meltdowns that happen once in a while really frustrating? Sure. And this one absolutely broke my heart. But I don't really attribute that to LaFleur. I think that part of what happened to the Packers was variance. I mean, Chicago went, what, I think 1 for 5 in fourth downs to begin this game. When you go for a bunch of fourth downs, they're going to start clicking eventually if you get enough chances. And they got opportunities for that offense to start clicking again. I think that Chicago called a fantastic defensive game to shut down some of what LaFleur wanted to do in the second half. It wasn't just that he took the ball out of Love's hands when he shouldn't have, which I do think that LaFleur did. There were a couple mistakes that were made, but at the end of the day, I don't put this on the head coach. I put it on the roster construction. Packers got killed by injuries this year. I mean, we were down 5 quality starters in that game: Tucker Kraft, Micah Parsons, Devontae Wyatt, Zach Tom, and Elton Jenkins. And that hurt. But not really addressing the interior offensive line, or addressing it very poorly, was a predictable weakness
Aaron Banks.
that yeah, Aaron, terrible signing. What, $20 million a year instead of flipping, was it a fifth for the elite pass protector for Chicago,
Tony.
Joe Tooney?
Yeah.
What did they get him for, a fifth? Or bringing in Kevin Zeitler for like $7 million
Mhm.
to have a borderline Pro Bowl caliber season for the Titans. No, we're gonna give $21 million to Aaron Banks. And we're not going to sign a real center after we let Josh Myers, who we selected over Creed Humphrey, walk. We're just going to trust that Elton Jenkins can do that. And yeah, he was fine at it, but he wasn't playing his best ball. And then Elton
Keep him
Jenkins goes
short.
down. That would absolutely be ideal. We don't have a backup plan because we used I think it was a fourth round pick on Jacob Monk, who set the preseason record for holding penalties per snap in a game. Like
I
four
remember that.
penalties in one preseason game, and he gave up a sack and a hit in that one.
I
That
remember
was the
that.
backup plan at center. heading into the season, so we can't play him. So we got to play Sean Ryan at center. Sean Ryan doesn't know how to snap a football, and he doesn't really know how to be a center. And outside of that, we tried playing Jordan Morgan at guard. That wasn't a good pick. It turns out Jordan Morgan doesn't seem to be able to play tackle or guard. And we tried plugging Anthony Belton in at guard, another college tackle. Can't really play guard in the pros, at least not as a rookie. There was no good plan at that position. And when you're a contender, you can't walk into the season with obvious weak spots. That's what we did on the offensive line. Interior defensive line, you lose Devontae Wyatt. The run game wasn't the deciding factor for Chicago in this one. I thought that Halfley did call a very impressive defense, especially in short yardage situations, but it's been a weak spot at other points. And you know what? If the Packers won that game, the lack of interior defensive line talent would have showed up down the stretch. This game was the culmination of a bunch of bad front office decisions that left you without depth. And the last thing I want to talk about, special teams for the Packers continues to be an absolute disaster. And I think a lot of that does come down to roster construction. I mean, here's a something I'm uniquely qualified to talk about. Was it 2 years ago, I believe, the Packers signed Matt Orzik from the Rams to be our long snapper and reset the market with that signing. And he remains one of the, I believe, the three highest paid long snappers in the NFL, genuinely in the bottom tier of snap consistency. He is elite in coverage, probably the best cover guy in the league, and is going to put up tackles for you. But when you're snapping for a 55-yard field goal, one thing I've noticed on a PAT, the snap can be fucking wherever. Laces in, snap is high after slam it out. It doesn't matter because kickers kind of just poke the ball between the uprights. 55-yarder, if there's extra movement on that snap where it has to be slammed down or it's inside and it has to be pushed out, that's enough for kickers to miss. And we saw that with Brandon McManus making crucial mistakes in this game. The kicking has just been another thing. We're not spending draft capital on a kicker. We're going with a retread. And a guy who got cold, and we let him play out the season, and the fact that he was cold cost us in a big moment. We don't devote roster spots to special teamers. And guess what? Gave up a huge punt return that handed the Bears points in this game. The special teams coverage is continually an issue. Fucking Josh Jacobs is returning kicks for us for some reason, and fumbles one of them because Josh Jacobs is not a kick returner. I don't care what anybody says. The new kickoff is not inside zone. I heard a lot of talk about that going into the year, like, oh, this is a new breed of returner. A lot of guys are viewing it as it's just like an inside zone rep. No, it's not. Put a fast guy who has a good eye for one cut out there and try and score a couple touchdowns or have a couple big returns over the course of the season. The special teams management has been a disaster under Brian Gutekunst. Brian Gutekunst has been responsible for a couple nice picks on day 3. Romeo Doubs, Zach Tom, Rasheed Walker, to name a few. I put day 3 drafting more on the scouting department. The big meta decisions where you're getting into positional value and where do we want to deploy our resources. I put that on the GM, and he has been miserable at that. So many second and third round picks lit on fire. All of those mistakes came to the forefront in this game. Yes, was it a bad meltdown? Absolutely. We should have gone in with a better roster. So I am on the fire Brian Gutekunst, leave Matt LaFleur alone for now train. And I think that's the end of my Packers rant. That one was tough. That was maybe my most heartbreaking experience as a football fan, and the Packers have been no stranger to that over the last 5-6 years.
Yeah, you guys have had a lot of heartbreaking experiences over the past few years, and I'm also on the same train with you. I say keep Matt LaFleur. I probably should have fired Brian Gutekunst and promoted John Eric Sullivan before he left for the Dolphins, if we're being honest here. But yeah, and it really wasn't his fault, LaFleur's fault. Like, he was very passive and gave the Bears chances to come back into that game, but you missed 2 kicks that, they would have mattered if he had made them. They would have won that game if they had made them.
3 kicks.
3 kicks, yeah. 3 kicks. He missed the PAT. So that means that you needed a touchdown instead of a field goal on the final drive. Ridiculous. McManus, like, I'm not a long snapper expert, but you are. So I trust you when you say that the long snapper cost him. But also, McManus, what do you have to do? You have to adjust to hard circumstances. Adjust. There's a tweet out there that were from an account Jesus Christ. There's a tweet out there that says Brandon McManus did not have a good game today, and it was tweeted by Brandon McManus's account. He was right. He was right when he tweeted it in 2021 when he lost the Broncos a game, and he was right today. Brandon McManus did not have a good game. He's not had many good games recently. Special teams has just been a disaster that's plagued the Packers for, I mean, as long as I've been watching football, it seems. That's terrible. But like you said, this team, even if they'd won this game, they weren't going to go far. I think their season really ended in Denver a few weeks ago whenever they lost Micah Parsons for the season. They just had lost too many great players. Like you said, fucking man, Zach Tom, Elton Jenkins, Devontae Wyatt, Tucker Kraft, and Mike Parsons, all of those guys are Pro Bowl talents. Like, not even just quality starters. All of them are Pro Bowl talents, and they made up such a big chunk of your roster, and you lose them. But it also exposed that you just don't have good depth on this team, and the best teams do have good depth, and the Packers didn't. This is not a well-constructed roster, and hopefully they can take a look at how they do things. Doesn't look like Goody's going to be fired. He probably should be, as you said, but you've still got the quarterback. You've got the play caller. Hafley will leave, but I think that they might go down the path of promoting someone. I don't know who, but Campanelli came from that defense, and he was very good. So Hafley may have done a really good job of developing those guys in underneath positions. Maybe one of them is ready to become a defensive coordinator, or you bring somebody else in. Maybe he's still Brian Flores from the Vikings. How fun would that be?
Let's go.
Yeah, maybe he makes a lateral move. Who knows? That would make him the most hated man in Minnesota history, but except for fucking Blair Walsh. But you never know.
I think that's literally illegal, which would make it even better. I think that if you make a lateral move, you have to go from not calling plays to calling plays.
No, because he took a interview to be the DC for the Commanders, and surely he would be calling
Really?
plays there. Yeah, because Dan Quinn doesn't even call
Huh.
plays there anymore.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
because Evero took a lateral move whenever Sean Payton got there. He went from calling plays in Denver to calling plays in Carolina.
Well, let's go.
Yeah, Brian
We want you,
Flores to
Brian
Green
Flores.
Bay. We want you. All right. But yeah, I don't have much else to say. Very rough loss there, and also the Packers lost because Caleb Williams made one of the best throws I've ever seen. It just, there are so many ways that they could have won that game, and just everything went against them. And it's trendy to like the Bears right now. I'm with you. Fuck the Bears. I don't like this team. I like Caleb Williams and I like Ben Johnson. I don't like the rest of them. Austin Booker, he's a dirty player. I don't like him. I don't like this defense. There's quite a few dirty players on that defense, I've noticed when watching their games. Why are you going for the knees there? They get too many roughing the passer calls for real roughing the passer calls too. I don't like this team. Even if I like the quarterback and the head coach, I don't like them. So I was rooting for the Pack to win that one. I don't dislike. Yeah, that's a rough way to end the season, and hopefully my team doesn't end the season in such a difficult way. But the Packers will be back. It's not a team I'm really worried about having regression.
Yep, we lost Coop midway through that game as well. And
Yeah,
with Coop out, that is when Colston Loveland took off. First half, Colston Loveland, I mean, he got force-fed the ball a lot, but there were some nice pass breakups in there, and then he ran wild after Edgerrin Cooper lost. One more note to add on how roster construction needs to be different. We are a Super Bowl contending team that went into the season deciding that Keyshawn Nixon, Carrington Valentine, and perennially injured Nate Hobbs were a satisfactory group of three cornerbacks. And that predictably came back to bite us in the ass. So the improvements that need to be made, they're clear. We're going to need to make some aggressive cap decisions, potentially shift money into the future. But the key pieces for a Super Bowl run, they're here. Just need guys to stay healthy and need a few crucial holes filled. I'm already ready for next year's heartbreak. We moved on.
yeah. I say just get a D. I get a corner. Just get a corner. Receiver is like, it's not great, and you would like a number one guy, but trust that Matthew Golden can continue to develop. You've got Tucker Kraft. Get a corner. That is the number one priority for this offseason.
Absolutely. I agree with you.
And just
And
get
that,
pieces. Sorry.
yeah. And
Corner and
special
depth.
teamers. Please,
Oh,
God,
my goodness.
special teamers.
Make a better team.
And that's the divisional round. Stay tuned next week for some coaching carousel talk, right? We're thinking next week for that?
I think so, yeah.
Perfect. Last year, during coaching carousel, we had takes like the Pete Carroll hire is a total waste of time. That was me. I think we were both in the pump the brakes on Aaron Glenn a little bit train. We also had takes like Brian Schottenheimer is the worst person to ever set foot on a football field. So some more accurate, some less accurate.
We
But
also had
it's going to
takes
be a great time.
like Fire Todd Bowles, and that seems to be aging well, even though, it didn't. He didn't get fired. Maybe he deserved to get fired. We also takes like Mike Tomlin. Maybe he deserves to go. We're good with coaching. We're smart.
I'm actually last year was kind of the first year that I got into coaches and schematics a little bit more. So I was happy with my takes, and your takes are great as always. I think you're stellar in that coaching in front
Thank
office
you.
and
Thank you.
schematic phase. So we're also going to preview the conference championships, obviously. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you there. And as always, stay hard.